So it is my pleasure to welcome to the Schubert Club, Jake Heggie. He is the composer of 8 full-length operas, including Dead Man Walking, Moby-Dick, and If I Were You. Dead Man Walking being the most performed American opera of the 21st century. Aside from his opera works, he's written chamber music, concerti, choral, and orchestral works, and to our great benefit, over 300 songs. On top of all of this, you will also find out that he is an outstanding pianist, working with so many singers who we at the Schubert Club are very familiar with, and luckily for us, include Jamie Barton. Jake Heggie, thank you for taking some time to speak with us leading into this recital.
So glad to be with you and really looking forward to the recital enormously.
When is the last time that you were in the Twin Cities?
It was a few years ago when the opera company did Dead Man Walking on Super Bowl Sunday.
And I'm sure it was still a great turnout. So
yes, it was. And it was a fabulous production, great cast. I had such a good time. I know so many wonderful people, so many wonderful people out there, and really looking forward to being out there. And I get to visit with a couple of them. So
great. Yeah, well, we're glad you're coming back.
Thank you.
I am particularly looking forward to this program because it features some gems of the standard repertoire, including the Schubert Club theme song. So well done you for programming that. And a second half filled with music that you've written. And so I wonder if you might talk a little bit about how you and Jamie went about crafting the program and what that process was like for you guys.
Sure. Well, Jamie actually is responsible for the bulk of it. Although we talked about it, she wanted to craft something that was around the importance of music in our lives. So it starts off with a song from a cycle of mine called The Breaking Waves, which begins a cappella, and it's called Music. And the text is by Sister Helen Prejean, who wrote the book Dead Man Walking. And it really is about the lifeline that music provides. And then that segues immediately into the Britten realization of Purcell's Music for a While. And I have to say, it's a very bold, touching, haunting way to start a recital program. And that was a combination of Jamie and me, but she wanted things that had to do specifically with music. And so then the Schubert set, of course, had to begin with On to Music, and from there. But the Schubert set was a given, as was a Brahms group in the piece, and the second half being mine. But the surprise in the first half to me were the Florence Price songs. I had never done any of her music, and she was an amazing composer, clearly a wonderful pianist, very challenging parts, but beautiful vocal lines and settings of gorgeous poetry. But it was a lot of back and forth. And the new cycle of mine has a song about music with a text by Ruth Bader Ginsburg that she wrote last April, just a few months before she passed away. She was a great friend of mine and of Jamie's. And then we recorded an album together in 2019 that came out last year called Unexpected Shadows. And we wanted to pull some things from that. This is actually our first go round with performing in public together. We recorded an entire album, but we've never performed together. She's done pieces of mine. She did Dead Man Walking down in Atlanta. We've done a lot together. I've written cycles for her before, but this is our first time really performing in public together.
Well, that's so exciting. I mean, normally it goes the other way around, where you do a recital tour, figure it out, and then go into the studio. Yeah, so that's a little backwards, but we'll take it.
Yeah. Well, you have to remember, Jamie's a very, very, very busy performer, and she happened to be in San Francisco summer of 2019 to sing Yeji Baba, the Witch, in Rusalka, one of my favorite operas. And it was amazing, but we decided that we could do it right after that run. She had a week of time, and we could go to a studio locally and put all these things together. And it's just too good to miss. And I'm so proud of the result. And we just click so well. She's so easy to play for because we inhabit music the same way. We breathe it the same way. And it's conversation, and it's like a tennis match in a way, you know, just hitting this thing back and forth. And I can tell by her body language and the way she's breathing what's going to happen next, where she's going to take a little more time. And it is all about conveying the inner light and life of these poems and these texts. And so we see eye to eye. The rehearsals were in San Francisco this week to rehearse, and it's just been so easy and such a joy. I can't wait to get in front of people and share it all.
Oh, that's so great. I mean, that's actually happens to be quite unusual when you find a partner like that, with whom you gel so easily and so readily. And that's a treat for not just you guys on stage, but it's a treat, you know, for all of us sitting in the audience also. Yeah. So that's going to be,
we're going to have a good time. I figure if you're going to work this hard, and at this stage, and certainly in my life and career, I'm going to have a good time. I want to work with people who inspire me, who challenge me, and with whom I have something to say, you know. And I feel such a deep connection to Jamie. She's extraordinary.
Oh, I am so looking forward to it. Everyone is, I'm sure. So tell me a little bit about, you know, speaking of doing things that you enjoy and experiencing this communicating together, you know, what about songs excites you? I mean, as I said, you've written plenty of them, over 300, right? And what it is about, you know, either the song form or, you know, the format of a song recital that really excites you, either as an audience member or, you know, on stage.
It's the immediacy and how really exposed and naked it is. You know, in an opera or a musical, the singer is a character. You know, they can do everything in the guise of this character. Yes, it's that person inhabiting that character, but it's a character. In a recital, you get to know the person's heart, you know, and it's the way they're going to approach illuminating those texts and the way those composers have set them. And I find that immediacy and that personal connection incredibly inspiring. And I always have, you know, long before I really knew anything about concert music, I was playing the piano as a kid, I was always drawn to solo singers. And back then it was Barbra Streisand and Carly Simon and Linda Ronstadt and, you know, Julie Andrews. And because they knew how to inhabit a song, you know, and you felt like they were making up the song as they went along. And so I've always looked for that kind of connection in the classical world. And I think song recitals are incredibly challenging in that regard, because it is so exposed, that it takes a singer with great strength, courage, and a sense of themselves to really do it. And when you find that person and then the connection as the pianist, and then to write for them, it's incredibly inspiring. And even though I'm primarily a theater composer, I'm in the opera house most of my life, it's the voice and the illumination of texts and transformational journeys that inspires me in beautiful words. And sometimes just simple meditations or thoughts or prose, but also grand poetry. It just depends. But I find it endlessly inspiring, and the possibilities are so extraordinary. And it will be different every single time.
That is the joy, right? Is it just can be new every time you step on stage. Whereas sometimes in a production, you feel oftentimes maybe a little bound to that character in that.
Well, you have to in any production, you know, you have to rehearse it so that it's set, because so many people are involved in an opera production. You have to lock it in. But even then, there's room for personal interpretation. And anyone who's gone to the opera knows there are certain nights where everything is electric and on fire, and other nights where something isn't quite the same, you know, and that has so many personalities involved. But with a recital, it really will be different every time. And I've had the great experience not only of playing for a lot of wonderful singers, especially Frederica von Stade and Joyce DiDonato, and now Jamie, and Susan Graham, wonderful, wonderful, great friends. But in my 20s, when I was a student at UCLA, I became the page turner, and I turned pages for Leontine Price, Renata Scotto, Tatiana Troyanos, any number of like extraordinary artists, Kiri Takanawa, and just, it was life-changing to be on the stage and sit in the page turner chair and watch those singers from behind and how they interacted with the audience. and how spontaneous they would be, even though it's something, the song is deep within their DNA, but they're like creating it for the first time. And just to stand behind Leontine Price and watch her breathe while David Garvey is listening to her and playing for her. I mean, I'll never forget it. I remember every single moment of that recital. It's so much a part of my life. It's so important to me. It's a deep emotional connection, which is why no matter how many operas I'll write, and I'm writing my 10th right now, I always go back to song.
Okay. Well, I turn pages for the Schubert Club sometimes, and I've unfortunately never turned for Leontine, but you know, I totally agree with this, where you feel like you're part of this energy, you get to be having this experience that, you know, everyone else is in sort of communion with you, but you are also just a little more adjacent to the action.
But it is this amazing sense of community. And I mean, this is what we've been missing over the past year, of course, is being in the room, feeling that vibration and being a part of that community. And well, thank goodness we have the online stuff for now, and probably going forward in the future as an option, you know. But it really is so extraordinary to feel the person breathe, to feel the vibration. And to listen to what they're going to do with that turn of a phrase or with that word or with that, and how it's going to change in the moment based on how everyone's feeling that day or what the energy is in the room.
It's so exciting. God, I want to, like, maybe I'll sneak into the Ordway this week, and if you need a page turner, you just let me know.
I'll let you know.
Okay.
So it's nerve-wracking being a page turner too. I mean, I remember one time, I was turning for Kiri Te Kanawa, and Roger Vignoles was at the piano, and they were doing this French set, some cantaloupe, Songs of the Auvergne. And it was on this old French sheet music that is essentially like tissue paper. And, and so I just remember turning this page and the whole score started to go down the piano. And I was like, I slapped it, I was holding it up. I was so terrified. And I saw him start to grin, and I could see Kiri up there kind of grinning too. And I thought, this has happened before. Fix this.
Just need to give them some tape and some cardboard paper, right? I mean, it's not rocket science.
Right.
Oh, well, you had mentioned earlier the first piece is from this set called The Breaking Waves, which is text by Sister Helen Prejean. And it's not the first song in the set, is that correct?
No, it's the third song in the set. Great. And it's a meditation. It's really kind of a confession from Sister Helen. The words, and it starts a cappella, and the words are, "For almost a year, I didn't know he could have music on death row." And then when I brought the tape player and headphones, he listened to music all night and told her the next day, I listened to music, and how it transformed him. It's based on a real story. It's a very moving song, I think. And I originally wrote it for Joyce DiDonato for her Carnegie Hall main stage debut 10 years ago.
Just yesterday, it feels
like. Actually, isn't it weird with COVID? It feels like there's everything before this past year feels like it was a million years ago all of a sudden. It's like things that used to feel like just, you know, like that were in 2015, 16, 17, that's not that long ago. Now they feel so far away. It's the strangest thing. So 10 years ago feels suddenly very far away. I don't know why.
Well, we're lucky to at least be able to experience something now that happened just a couple of days ago.
Right.
Something new, though, is this new commission from the Tucson Desert Song Festival. So we should send them a big thank you and a shout out.
Great
for that. Yes. And this, so it's a new, are you calling it a cycle or is it a set?
Oh, no, it's a new cycle. And it's about a little over a year ago, Jamie and I were thinking of what this new cycle was going to be. And it was just after the shutdown happened. So that was mid-March. And we were already at the beginning of April, and it had felt really long. And we weren't sure how long it was going to be. It wasn't, you know, people were talking, well, we'll be open by the summer, you know, and then, you know, that all went away. And then it was, well, maybe we'll be open in the fall, and then all that away. And then it's like, maybe the spring, and then all that away. But back in March, April, even though it was scary, none of us had ever been through this. People were getting sick. There were deaths. I thought we need to capture this moment. There's something very valuable in capturing the spirit of this moment, what people are feeling. So Jamie and I asked like 20, 30 of our friends to send poems, meditation, texts, just a thought, anything that they were feeling in this moment. And I'm so glad we did it then, because there's something actually sweetly naive about that moment. We didn't know how long it was going to be. We didn't know how horrible it was going to be. We hadn't yet gotten into the very difficult, tense civil rights issues of the summer, the political upheaval of the fall. And, you know, I'm glad we captured it. And so we asked a bunch of people, so many people responded, and we had to narrow it down. And it came down to these 5 women. Joyce DiDonato wrote a poem that was a total surprise to me. I didn't know she wrote poetry. Patti Lupone wrote this wonderful meditation on finally being able to be home with her family and not having to be away all the time. And do I really miss anything? Actually, I don't. And then Sister Helen Prejean wrote something about, again, being home, enjoying this sense of not being on the road constantly, but also feeling this nudging of guilt about, I still have to work. There's still this call I have to answer. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg just wrote a couple of lines. She passed away 4 months later, but she sent this. We've communicated a lot through the years. I have a lot of letters and emails and things. And she just sent me an email with a few lines and about how she missed music made in person by many in unison, that virtual collaboration, as good as it is, pales in comparison. Just miss being in the room for music. And it's a kind of a wonderful elegy for her spirit and what because she loved the opera and she loved singers more than anything. And then the last one is by a conductor and pianist named Kathy Kelly, who's a very dear friend. And she wrote a beautiful poem. And it is about what we're experiencing right now, even looking at someone that you can't be in the room with and talking to them long distance. And, you know, that might be someone that you love or care about very, very much. And thank goodness we have this. And yet you kind of want to reach through the screen and reach out and grab that person too. So it's about that yearning to be in the room, and yet how grateful to and lucky we are to be able to have this. So it's a beautiful set of thoughts and meditations and poems. And I found it very inspiring to set those for Jamie. She's such a powerhouse with a great, huge heart and this voice that's like, you know, from the bottom to the top, just even and gorgeous and radiant, every single part of it. And so it just frees you up to explore so much.
I wonder what it was like for you and for Jamie to reach out to so many of these colleagues during that time and ask them to be sharing, you know, these personal experiences that are, you know, at once universal that we're all experiencing, but then again, you know, quite personal.
Yeah.
And I wonder what that connection was like, and if that in itself felt like an exercise in art making and communal being.
It gave us a purpose in that moment, because everything had disappeared, you know, all the recitals, all the work, all of my productions, everything was gone. And so it gave us something to do. And I think the people who wrote were so glad to have a task in that moment, something creative to do when so much creativity had been stopped in that moment. So it actually was a great blessing. I mean, we have enough to do several cycles. And in fact, there is one that I am going to write that it didn't fit in this cycle, but it's going to be a great encore piece. And it's about Zoom. And, it's with Jamie, you know, just, you know, and me as the pianist going, Jamie, you're muted. And then getting the whole audience to say, tell her she's muted. And then going from there. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I didn't have time. I'm writing an opera for Jamie right now too, so I didn't have time to write that song, but that is happening.
Well, we will look for that. Hopefully not on Zoom, but yeah. I look forward to hearing that. And then, you know, I just want to stick on this new cycle for a bit, because it's such an opportunity. Schubert Club is, you know, we're so proud to be championing all new works over the organization's long history. And this is just one more example of delivering new, exciting music to our community and to everyone now that we're online, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder why you didn't include things that you and Jamie had written, or if you had gone through that process.
Yeah, I don't think that was ever a question for us. It was going to be other people. The fact that she's singing it and I'm playing it meant something in and of itself. But we wanted to let these other voices be heard. And I think it's a surprising array of voices for this particular set. I mean, you don't expect RBG and Patti Lupone to be in a set with Sister Helen and Joyce and Kathy. It was surprising, and yet it is such an interesting insight into those people's psyches and lives, and they're, like I said, very personal but universal experiences. But it was never a question that we were actually going to do it. We thought maybe there would be some actually spoken parts in between songs, but it just turned out to be that there's such an emotional thread that connects it, that it just felt right. It has this lovely glow and kind of halo around it. So we weren't sure. It was kind of amorphous at first, what it was going to be or how it would end up. But as I was writing, it just, as happens when I'm deeply immersed in a project, things start to reveal themselves, and the shape and the tone of it starts to emerge. And this just sort of came fully formed in that way.
And so the thing tying them together is this emotional thread that you're speaking of.
There's this yearning like through the middle of it all. Yeah.
And so in composing, 5 distinct voices, right? Setting these 5 very unique voices. Yeah. Any challenges in trying to create, you're presenting someone's personal experience, as we said earlier. It's, Jamie's on stage being a person as a vehicle for this other person's experiences. Yeah. And any unique challenges in working in that kind of format?
No, because you know what? I know Jamie so well, and I know all the people who wrote the text so well. So it was really just, a lot of composition is listening. It's just sitting there and listening and letting things resonate. And then, like I said, they emerge or reveal themselves when they're right. And I don't know why it's right. I just know when it is right. I know when it's wrong. I know when it's not right too. But you have to allow yourself to create that mess and then find your way through it and let the truth of it, the authenticity of it emerge. But a couple of them were very surprising. Joyce's was very surprising because it's really about the order to retreat, go home, be silent, wait for the signal to emerge. And there's a little fear, and it's very strong. It's almost like a march. It came out. That was very surprising. Patti's was surprising because everyone who hears it, or knows Patti Lupone's work, they expected something, very, brassy and, with this kind of belty Broadway thing. And it's very personal and touching and exuberant, exulting in being able to participate in nature for a while. It's really hard for me to talk about how I write music because I don't know. I just know what the elements that I need for it to emerge. And because I do, when I write operas or songs, I am creating characters and writing for them. And I recognize when it's authentic because the character starts speaking to me. And I try never to impose something on the character. I want them to speak. So like I said, it's just listening. And part of, in an opera, getting to know a character so well that I'm just taking dictation from them. And I could go for a walk outside of the context of the opera and still hear them singing. It's the same thing with writing songs. It's just getting to know the voice of that particular persona, of that event, of that transformation that's happening within that song. Because I always feel something needs to be somewhat different at the end of a song than at the beginning, so that there's a journey. But I said it's just listening to get to know how it goes. Sorry.
No, please don't apologize. My goodness, that'd be silly. We'll transition into something a little lighter fare, and that is from lockdown into our feline house companions. And these were actually the first Jake Heggie songs that I ever experienced as a student. And as someone that was really dedicated to learning how to do Schubert and Schumann correctly, this was felt so foreign to me to play for these songs that were so felt so immediate and so sort of earnest, and it felt I had no idea what to do with it. As like a 20-year-old, I had no idea. And then I saw a masterclass that you gave where you talked about, writing for these singing actors all the time.
Right.
And suddenly this just clicked with me, and I said, oh my goodness, I understand this now. That's what little baby God is doing around destroying these planets and things. And so in terms of setting out to create something that's maybe more extroverted and something maybe that's more comedic on its face. What's that kind of process like for you in working with, because you knew who was going to premiere those again, is that correct? That was another for a specific singer?
Yes, it was for Jenny Larmore. These were songs that were commissioned by a good friend of mine via Neda Horgoff. And she knew this poet named Gavin Jeffrey Dillard, who actually at that time was her gardener at her place in Stinson Beach. But he wrote poems, and he later went on to write libretti and all other kinds of things. And she really thought I might respond to his poems. And he sent me this set, and it just took off, and this was after I had taken quite a hiatus from writing any music, because I had, in my late 20s, I developed a focal dystonia where my hand curled into a fist and I couldn't play. For almost 5 years. I had to retrain myself, and I had moved to San Francisco. I had a job at the San Francisco Opera in the PR marketing department. And so my job was to be in the opera house and get to know all these singers and take them to interviews and go to all the opera rehearsals and write about them and get them out to the public. I mean, it was a great apprenticeship, even though also a great job. I loved my job. And then all of a sudden I had the opportunity to write songs for all these wonderful people. And so when Gavin gave me these texts, they burst to life in my head. I hadn't written anything like them. They're funny, they're wry, they're fun, they're universal. And they have a lot of sort of jazz influence in them, as well as some of the early song influence in my world from Ned Rorem and Virgil Thompson and that kind of influence. There's a little Peggy Lee influence in.
Oh, I totally hear that. Yeah.
In the first song, it's a cycle called Of Gods and Cats. And the first one is about the almighty cat. And the second is about God as a little boy and his mother scolding him, stop messing everything up, stop creating these universes and planets and then destroying them. And it's a real fun romp for a singer. And I've actually heard many different kinds of singers sing these songs over the years. And it's just been a ball, because I mean, I wrote them. It was a commission. It was a very early commission for me, like 1995, but it was just a lot of fun, That's when I was just getting back into songwriting.
And do you have a cat that it was inspired by? This is the hard-hitting journalism they've brought me here for.
No, I did not have a specific cat. I am a dog person. I'm not a cat person. But we had a lot of cats when I was growing up. At one point, there were 12 in the house. So we had all kinds of pets when I was growing up, but I got to know cats pretty well. And Jamie is a total cat person. So she gets the song, completely.
Perfect.
And actually the first figure you hear on the keyboard is the sound of basically a cat walking across the keys. That's what I was going for.
Well, I can't wait to hear it again, with not a student singer. That's going to be a real treat. And so to close out the second half of the program, we've got another set of songs that you wrote on another commission, I think. Is that correct? The iconic Legacies?
Yes.
And so this is just, I think, one more example of your ability to create something that feels so immediate, but also has this sense of empathy and personhood in it that I think I find to be a real hallmark of your writing. And I wonder, if kind of how it came about, because it's about objects in the Smithsonian, but you came about it kind of in a roundabout way in viewing these objects through the lens of a historical person kind of attached to that object.
Yeah, First Ladies, iconic. It's called Iconic Legacies, First Ladies at the Smithsonian. And Gene and I had been commissioned.
This is Gene Scheer.
Gene Scheer, right? Who's been my librettist and my collaborator on, oh my God, over 50 songs, and more to come. And it was for this song program in Washington, D.C. And they wanted a new piece, and I was going to write it for Susan Graham. And I like to, when a piece is commissioned in that way, to find a way to connect it to the community. For example, I did a set for the Dallas Opera that are connected to objects in the Dallas Museum of Art. I had done a set called Statuesque, which was based on art objects in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And so we were in DC, and so I thought, let's do something connected to either the National Gallery or the Smithsonian. And at first it was going to be paintings that hang in Supreme Court justices' chambers, because they're allowed to pick something from the National Gallery to be in their office. And I thought that is interesting. I mean, because that gives you a different perspective on some of these Supreme Court justices historically. And there are records going back about who had what hanging in their chambers. And I thought, that it's a really good idea, but it just somehow wasn't working. And suddenly it was starting to feel political. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And then I thought, but there are so many interesting objects. And then Gene found Marian Anderson's mink coat that she wore when she sang on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, that iconic moment in American history. And then all of a sudden we realized Eleanor Roosevelt made that possible. So let's have Eleanor Roosevelt sing about Marian Anderson and the coat she wore that day and what that event meant. And all of a sudden the whole thing came to life, because I thought, these first ladies who have something to say and an object that we can go find in the Smithsonian that represents a major transformative moment in their lives. And so for Eleanor Roosevelt, it's Marian Anderson's mink coat. For Mary Todd Lincoln, it was the hat Lincoln was wearing when he was assassinated, but not just the hat, it's the mourning band that Lincoln put around it, because their son Willie had just died before Lincoln was assassinated. So it's very fraught and rich. And of course, she was accused of madness and being hysterical, and even by her sons, and later in her life. And so, just the grief that must have consumed her in that moment, I found very inspiring to go deeply into that. And then Gene found a Christmas card that had been signed by John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, just a few days before that fateful trip to Dallas where he was assassinated. And so a meditation on that, and him choosing the pink Chanel suit that she wore, that we all have pictures of in our minds. And then the last one, because we needed something lighter, was Barbara Bush and her literacy campaign that involved the Muppets. And I grew up loving the Muppets. I know we all do. And so that it was just something very, very different, and yet another very important, iconic legacy at Smithsonian that has touched all our lives. And so we're ready to write, dozens more, because there's so many interesting stories with these great first ladies and an object that represents something that was key to their life and something transformative.
And what is it like to again assemble a set of songs that comes back again with all these disparate characters. I mean, even within it, we're getting, you know, vastly different time periods.
Yeah.
Is that anything we can hang our hat on while we listen to in terms of the musical language there?
Oh, I think you'll hear it. Well, for example, you'll hear the anthem in the first song that Marian Anderson was singing, and you know, and Eleanor Roosevelt as a character, Jamie as Eleanor Roosevelt saying, "Listen, listen, Marian Anderson is singing to thee, of thee," and Gene wrote these beautiful texts. But we tried to capture some of their personality as human beings, as iconic women, that captures some of their some of what they were confronting or what they were dealing with in that moment, something they were trying to maybe explore in that moment that's related to this object, what it meant to them. And again, for me, it was just listening to the character and finding out how they speak, what's the rhythm of that, how do I illuminate that? And because it's so hard to describe, but even with something like one of these songs, or with Dead Man Walking, or a song of Dickinson, it's something that is very specific to a time and yet timeless. Something that through my lens feels very American and yet universal, these experiences, because they're deeply human experiences. And so listening to those human beings and finding a way also for a singer how a singer is going to inhabit that and do that on the stage. I'm very visual because I'm a theater composer. So imagining how the singer is going to look, how they could move, how the opportunities I can give them to explore this vocally and physically on the stage. So all of that goes into it. But you'll hear a couple of motifs through this cycle that I think you'll hear the thread carry through from beginning to end. I like motifs a lot.
Good, important in opera, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
great, super.
But Schubert, I got to tell you, Schubert was so important to me. Schubert, Schumann, that whole school was so important to me early on. I studied songwriting and composition when I was 16 years old with a man named Ernst Bacon, who was a great American songwriter. And he was 80 something when I was 16, 17, studying with him in the Bay Area. And he opened up that whole world to me, because before then I had been setting my own texts and continuing to write for like Streisand and thinking I was going to write for Julie Andrews and all these people. And he said, you know, you can set other people's poems. And I said, really? And then he started introducing me to art song. And it was so transformative. I just remember hearing Schubert songs, and he loved Schubert. So he introduced me to all this range of song. And then I had a song coach and teacher about art song at UCLA named Jim Lowe, who he actually, because he saw the passion I had for it, he was a pianist, a terrible singer, but he loved it so much, and he recognized how much it meant to me, that over the summer I would go to his house like 2 or 3 times a week, and we would make our way through all of the major song cycles and all of the major songs of the great German composers. And so it's ingrained in me, that reverence for that art form. And so that has a great influence and impact over me. And thinking about how that group responded to poetry, and how like still the surprise of Gretchen am Spinnrad is like so extraordinary, you know, or Irrsinnig, you know, you hear that song sung by a great artist, you cannot believe someone actually thought that up and put it on the page, you know? And so that inspiration to me is key. I want to find something that is surprising, inevitable, and that will surprise the singer and maybe the audience too. I don't want it to be predictable. I want it to be inevitable, so that it feels, well, of course it has to go like that. And yet, how surprising is that? Which can be challenging. But again, it's just listening and challenging myself in different ways, so that things will take me down a different path, so I don't just repeat myself. But new colleagues, new poems, new perspectives, all of that is key to it.
Well, this new collaboration with you and Jamie live is going to be so exciting for us. Hopefully just as exciting for you guys.
Oh, we are so excited.
That's great. Well, you travel safely get to Minneapolis, St. Paul, you know, as expediently and safely as you can, please.
We will. We will.
And thank you so much for taking some time to talk about the program that we are about to hear.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting us in. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jake.